Hey everyone, Alexis Zotos here, 6 News reporter, and our investigative producer, Ryan. We are doing a hangout right now to kind of talk about what we found in our investigation of Morristown Utility Systems. Our months-long investigation aired last week, several different parts, just taking a look at the financial records of the utility company in Morristown. And we found a lot of interesting things, including about $91,000 in travel expenses, $8,000 in dining out in Morristown, a budget of about $33,000 for company banquets. And so this is sort of our opportunity to answer all the questions that we've been getting from viewers who have seen our story and have been commenting on the story and on Facebook and on Twitter. And this is sort of our opportunity to answer some of those questions. So our social media producer is over here. You can say hello.
Hi.
She is going to be reading your questions that you submit on Facebook and on Twitter, and some of the comments that we've had on our stories. So I'm going to...
So first off, I guess just Ryan, kind of what did you do helping Alexis with this story? What was your role?
Well, we started off, I guess, in March. I mean, it's been a while. Just looking at utilities all across East Tennessee. We've mailed records requests to, I guess, about 24 utilities. Morristown, soon after we mailed something there, we heard back from multiple people saying, you need to check this out, look for spending. Some people told us about specific trips to look for. So when we started looking for those trips in our first records request, they were missing. So instantly, red flag for us. We knew we needed to take a closer look. So we did. That took 2 months.
And when you watch our stories, obviously you can see me and you hear my voice, but Ryan has been, a huge part of this investigation, putting in so much legwork. I mean, we've spent, how many hours would you say we've spent on this story?
Probably 40 at least
a lot.
At the utility.
Yeah. So Ryan was really instrumental in putting out those initial open records requests, and basically what that is, if people don't know, is you can put in an open records request to your utilities, to your government, to anyone, just asking for those records. That's your right when it's a public entity. And so Ryan was really instrumental in giving all those, and like he said, we requested them for all the utilities in our area, just kind of curious, what are these utilities spending their money on? So he played a huge role, even if you didn't see his face.
So just getting into the process, I know you brought props. What kind of was the process going through this investigation step by step?
Sure. Well, as Ryan kind of mentioned, so once we got that initial request in, some people were able to email us certain documents. Some people said we had to come pick them up. That was the case with Morristown. So we went to their offices, and they essentially just had boxes lined up in their conference table of what we had requested, which was expense reports, credit card statements, salaries. So they had those in boxes, so we spent the time going through those. So it's a sort of tedious process, just taking notes on things that we found interesting. And like Ryan mentioned, we were aware of some trips. A specific one that we mentioned in our investigation was a trip to Denver that they took last year. And so we knew about that, and that was not there in our request. So we knew some things were missing possibly. So we put in another request that sort of expanded our search. And these binders are just kind of this is only, I don't know, a tiny fraction of all the documents we went through, because then that got into once we wanted those documents, kind of this process and this sort of difficulty we had in actually obtaining the documents that we wanted. And
we knew early on that was going to be an issue. After the first request, I think the first invoice was about $500 for 200 documents, so more than $3 a page for that. So right off the bat, we knew we were going to have to be at least somewhat selective about what we request, because it was going to be a fight to get those documents.
And just kind of the background again on open records laws. So they are allowed to charge us to make copies, but they're allowed to charge us the time that it takes for them to look for these. But the charges that we were charged were very large compared to some of the other utilities per se, and you know, there were.
So what did KUB charge you guys when you pulled theirs?
So we requested a similar amount from KUB, and they provided us actually with 2 discs. This had all of the the travel expenses for the last 2 years and the salaries of their employees, which was similar to what we got from Morristown. They charged us $2 for these discs. So our final bill with Morristown was around $900. And, you know, we wanted this information. We wanted to be able to share it with the public. And while our lawyers got involved and you know, kind of lowered that bill because there were some charges that, you know, kind of go against the open records laws, it was still a really pricey endeavor to get these physical documents that we've organized in these binders.
That brings us to Melissa Renee Allen's questions. She says, can we request spending dockets from our utility companies as customers? How does that work?
That's a good question. We received a lot of calls from people actually after the story aired saying, I want to know what my utility company is spending. And yeah, any citizen, any person can request these records and these documents. But in our case that we experienced and was that it can be expensive, and that makes it a little difficult to kind of take a look at what's going on in your community if you want to know if there are these really high rates being charged for documents, and they make it really difficult for citizens to get access to those. That was something that surprised us.
Yeah, and to put those numbers into even more perspective, I mean, we had requested from other utilities who sent us the records, no bill whatsoever. I mean, there were probably 2 or 3 that just sent the records, no charge whatsoever. So, yeah, once again, we were surprised by the charge.
Transparency, at least in our opinion, and that was some of the questions raised by some people we talked to about our story, was just that there's a lack of transparency. And, you know, obviously we understand that there's work involved with gathering these records. You know, we understand that, you know, there was some great people at Morristown Utility that spent a lot of time copying these. And we get that takes time, and you know, they should be compensated for that time. But when you charge such a high rate, then it makes it difficult for just regular citizens to request some of this information. But anyone has the right to request salaries, any documents that that your utility company has, or any public entity. You're allowed as a citizen to request those documents.
And I think one lesson we took away from this is that when you just want to look at a record, you don't have to pay for that. They tried to charge us for that, and we had to go to our lawyers and make sure we were on the right side of the law. You can just look at something and not pay for it. It's when you want copies that you have to pay for it.
Right.
We had a question by Chrissy Stewart. She wants to know why we focused on Morristown Utility specifically as opposed to other utilities.
I think we just got into that a few moments ago. I mean, we got red flags from that utility almost immediately. We didn't start with a focus on that utility. We looked at about 24 utilities and then got the red flags.
You know, again, it speaks to that transparency issue. Once we realized that there were documents missing that we knew were there, it raised red flags in our minds to, okay, well, maybe we should keep digging. And then it became such a process that we couldn't focus on any other utilities. We realized, well, I think we've got something here. We need to dig in. And like we told you, it was a lot of manpower and a lot of hours devoted to that. And, you know, obviously we have a bunch of other stories we cover on a regular basis as well, and shows to produce. So this took up a lot of our time and effort. So, I mean, we obviously still want to, you know, if you have a utility that you're interested in looking at, you know, there's a lot of things that can be looked at, and that was just sort of, we didn't go in with the focus of Morristown, but that kind of became.
So when you talk about time, kind of talk about how much time it took to pull these documents. I know you got into that a little bit, but just with hours and manpower.
Yeah, I mean, just sitting, and you know, Morristown is not a hop, skip, and a jump from Knoxville. So the time driving up there, and again, because we could only look at these documents in their office under their supervision, you know, and we're talking, you know, little receipts and credit card statements. So this was not just skimming it. And because of the the expense, what we knew they were trying to charge us, I think it came down to about $1.29 per page. So we knew that, so we couldn't request just everything because it would have been thousands of dollars, and we can't pay that.
Well, and even after after that first instance where records were missing, we knew we had to take a very close look and look at everything. So every credit card statement for every credit card there over 2 years. So I think it was 26 months total. And at any time, it looked like they had about 15 credit cards, maybe 20 credit cards out there. So looking through all those and then looking through the receipts to verify those amounts, I mean, it added up to a lot of time. Like I said, probably 40 hours there easily just sitting in the boardroom with people watching us.
Because we wanted to be really meticulous in our research. Our goal was just to take a look at this stuff and present it to our viewers. Once things raised our eyebrows, and we figured that it would raise the eyebrows of the ratepayers as well. And once we even gathered the documents, then it goes into just the compiling. And Ryan is a master with Excel and numbers, and so he was really the person behind figuring out, adding up, how much did each of these people spend? What does this come out to? What does it mean for ratepayers for them to spend that? I think we found that certain things with the banquet, for example. Do you remember what that came out to per ratepayer?
One of them came out, I think it was about $1.
$1 and some change. Each ratepayer, that's basically what they were paying for that $33,000 banquet budget. So we wanted to kind of put some of these numbers into context and perspective.
Well, and another reason we took such a close look at it is because we wanted to be fair on the story and not pick out just random charges. We wanted to see, is there a trend here? And what we found is that year after year, this seemed to be an ongoing thing, and we kept on looking further.
Some of the things that we saw, the steak dinners, and those were, $400 dinners. If we had seen one receipt, maybe it would have been, well, that's, but it might not have raised as much of but we saw a pattern of it. There was steak dinner after steak dinner, and that's sort of why we realized this is a pattern of a concern.
Christina writes, isn't this just like any other company anywhere? Every company has comp dinners, hotel stays, airfare for employees and clients. How does Morristown Utilities differ from some other corporation?
Well, this is a public utility, and I think we knew that going in, of course. But talking to people on the streets of Morristown, they don't have a choice but to pay for these things. And we ran into several people who said, well, we make $15,000 a year, and we investigated raises. One person got, I think, a $12,000 raise in 1 year. They said, I can't imagine that. That's what I make an entire year. So these people don't have a choice but to pay for it. Right. So this is not a corporation where people have a choice what they buy.
Yeah, again, I think that's the key, and is that this is a public utility, and most government agencies, even a lot of private companies, when employees travel, there's a per diem. They are given maybe a $50 a day to eat off of, and then there's a hotel, rate that's standard. And, talking to other government employees, just kind of as we've been talking about this story, they go to Nashville a lot as well. A lot of them, have business in Nashville, they work in Nashville, and they stay at, hotels that are maybe $100, $120, whereas some of the hotels we found in Nashville were closer to the $250, $300 range. And so, yes, there are corporations that can do this, and and that's because they're private businesses, and customers have they have a choice whether to shop there or not. But this is, again, like Ryan said, it's a public utility, and they're the only ones in Morristown, for the central city of Morristown, and so these people don't have a choice, and there is a responsibility to the ratepayer to keep those rates down and to ensure that they're being good stewards of ratepayer money.
And going back to the thing you mentioned with the per diem amounts, when we looked at some of the other utilities, we noticed on their expense reports, they had amounts that they could spend. It was like $10 for breakfast, $20 for lunch and dinner, something like that. Whereas with Morristown, there were no set amounts. It appeared to be charge it and we'll figure it out later. So that was one huge difference.
Right, and a lot of things, a lot of those receipts we showed you guys in our story, there were reimbursements. There are certain dinners where there was alcohol purchased or things like that, and they were reimbursed. But we did find that to be not normal, talking to other utilities and talking to other public entities, that wouldn't really be allowed. If you can, if you wanted to, let's say you bought dinner and then you were reimbursed for that from your company, but it's not usually the other way around. It's not you putting a charge on the company card and then you reimbursing that. We did find that to be unusual talking to other utility companies. They did say that was not the normal business practice.
And that comes back to accountability, which we talked to the mayor there about, because we found multiple flights where family flights had been charged. They came along on these conferences, and then it was reimbursed back to the utility. Well, talking to him, he said we would never allow that in the city, and they should be subject to the same credit card policies we are. Right. So the accountability issue, and they mentioned that today in the board meeting, that they're going to take a closer look and see what they should do as far as spending policies, because right now I think that's questionable. Because
there were a lot of things that when we were going through those receipts that, you mentioned, I mean, these conferences, they're in, Denver, San Diego, things like that. And a lot of times we found the spouses of board members or utility employees were going along, and they were putting those flights on the company card. They were reimbursing them for what we found. But that's still, there wasn't a very obvious system to that, and I just think that can cause accountability issues. Things can get lost in there when you've got so many cards out there and purchases going on them.
So Laura Kaiser writes, this report seems one-sided. Why are we not hearing more from Morristown Utility?
And that's a great question. I mean, we tried very hard to, we wanted to be very fair. We tried to just present our findings in our story, and we asked multiple times to sit down with the CEO, with the CFO of Morristown Utility Systems, and let them explain what these are. One of the things they tell us is that these conferences are really vital to their business practices, and that they are asked to speak at these conferences. They learn a lot of new ideas, and that creates a better industry and better business practices for them. And so we really just wanted them to sit down and explain that to us, and also explain some of the numbers that we found. Unfortunately, they did not want to do an on-camera interview. We were able to email them a set of questions, and then they emailed us a response. And even after the second story aired, we asked again. We asked again today, and they don't want to sit down and do an on-camera interview with us, which is unfortunate, because it does look like we're not giving them that opportunity, but we have extended that offer and asked many times.
We just had a whole bunch of new people join us. You guys could go over maybe just like how they can ask you questions.
Sure.
And kind of what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, for everyone that's joining us, thanks so much. We're talking about our investigation into Morristown Utility System, and kind of throughout this story that we've been working on for months, and it aired last week. After our story aired, we had so many calls and emails asking us questions, and that's kind of why we wanted to do this hangout, allowing you guys to ask us and give us an opportunity to answer them sort of in person. So if you want to, if you're on Facebook or you're on Twitter, you can just tag #6investigates. You can tweet our 6 News account right on our 6 News Facebook. If you're following me on Twitter, it's just @Alexis Zotos. So feel free to ask us any questions that you have kind of regarding our several-part series into the financial situation at Morristown Utility Systems.
So we did have some new news today that you reported on. Can you kind of go over that?
Sure. Well, today we had this morning was their monthly board meeting. So the way the utility is set up is there's the utility, there's the utility, they have a CEO, they have a CFO, they have a lot of employees, and then they have a board, which is who is in charge of the, kind of the oversight. Their board is who is in charge of oversight. So it's a 5-person board, and today was their monthly board meeting. And we didn't know what to expect going in, and this morning the CEO, Jody Wigginton, actually called for a review of their policies surrounding travel, dining out in Morristown, the use of company cards, as well as the end of the year banquets. So they said, we've heard the concerns from customers. We've heard the report from our station, and they said that they're going to take a look at those policies and review them, and if changes need to be made, then they will bring those forth to the board in the next coming month or so. So that was, that was really interesting. I mean, I think that's what people wanted. Whether you think that these are questionable or excessive spending or not, I think there have been enough questions raised by citizens, and that the board and the management decided that they did want to take a look at them. So that was exciting for a lot of people, I think, to hear today.
I think it's important to point out, they're not promising that they're going to change anything. They're saying they're going to take a look at it, and that's something we brought to the mayor's and asked him about, because these are the same people who made these charges, and they're holding themselves accountable in this situation. So we asked him, are you going to do anything? And you talked to him about that.
Yeah, and he said, he'd like to give them an opportunity to come up with their own solutions. As you know, we also reported today, a source has told us that the comptroller's office, which is in charge of audits, the state comptroller, they have been given the information from our story, and they are beginning a review. So again, they do that all the time for utilities, for other business or other public entities. So what those are is it's a deeper look at the financial statements. Because one thing we kept hearing was, Morristown Utilities is audited every year, and that's true, but those are broad audits. Those are basically just looking at the basics of the numbers and making sure they all sort of match.
Just making sure nobody's cooking the books. It's not, those audits do not look at, is the spending excessive? Is it questionable? Is it wasteful? They just look at is somebody lying about the numbers, which from what we could tell, that's not the case.
That's not what we found. And when I spoke with the comptroller's office, they can't comment on investigations, whether to confirm that they're ongoing or not. But what they said that they do, the things that they look at are waste, fraud, and abuse. So if something meets a criteria of that, then yes, they'll go in and they'll take a look at it. And anyone can request that. I mean, a citizen can, a public official can, anyone has the ability to contact the comptroller's office with those concerns.
So Tracy still writes, what's going to happen now? Will this be swept under the rug? Is there a possibility of, nothing changing?
Well, we asked the mayor that because, once again, like we said a few moments ago, the utility, they're basically saying, we're going to take a look at it. This is going to be an internal investigation. So we wanted the mayor to know, who said that he was going to contact the state comptroller's office. How are you going to hold them accountable? He said they've got about 3 months. They need to figure this out and come up with some changes, or at that point, I'm going to go to the comptroller.
And again, and somebody else, according to our source, has gone to the comptroller. So there's a couple of different avenues. We're obviously not backing down on this story, and we've been asked to continue following suit. So, I think Morristown Utility, they obviously said today they're going to review it, and they said their next board meeting will be a month from now. I think it's June, end of June. But so they are going to come to that board meeting with a review of these policies, and so that'll be interesting to see. Do they think changes need to be made? Some of the things that they, so they were going to look at, especially in regards to those credit cards, were how many cards do we have out there? Do we need to look at the way that the supervisor looks at those expenses and approves those expenses? And are there some ways that we can look at the banquet? The banquet was something that I think a lot of people it raised their eyebrows. $33,000 for a company breakfast and an end-of-the-year banquet, which I don't think the party or the event is the concern. It's there were a lot of gift cards and and TVs and trips to Dollywood that were given out as gifts to employees, and I think it was a concern for people that was all being paid for, again, with ratepayer dollars. So one of the suggestions by a board member today was, well, maybe in the future those should be donations. Maybe the people in the community, restaurants in the community, can donate those gift cards, because the idea is that this is an appreciation banquet, and we know that these utility workers work hard. We cover storms and snowstorms, and we know that a lot of those utility members are out in these terrible weather conditions, and they work hard, and they do deserve to be appreciated. I think there was just a concern on the way it was being done is what we were hearing from customers and ratepayers.
Yeah, and every city official we talked to said the same thing. These people deserve an appreciation of it. It's not about whether they deserve it. It's what's being given out.
Right.
And
the cost.
Right, the cost. And the other issue, when we talked to Jody about the gifts being given out,
That's
he said,
the CEO.
Well, yeah, the CEO, I apologize. He said, well, these people, they don't get bonuses on their checks. Employees don't get bonuses on their checks, so we hand it out. Well, one thing the mayor mentioned today is that, well, it was basically door prize giveaways, so not everybody's getting these.
So if you want to give, you know, an appreciation or a recognition of
everyone,
then maybe give it to everyone. So I think there was just the way it was done, and I think it's just raised some questions.
So one thing we haven't gotten into is your second piece that you guys did on raises by Morristown Utility Systems. Could you kind of talk about that?
Sure. And honestly, what we did find were the salaries themselves weren't that out of line at all. I mean, they were lower than the salaries at KUB. Now, KUB is a much larger utility. It was the raises that were kind of what struck us, and we just looked at you know, kind of those top executives, and Ryan had kind of mentioned from 2010 to 2011, the CEO received a $12,000 raise, and I mean, if you remember, that's right in the middle of the recession, and you know, people in Morristown were basically upset about that because it was just such a significant raise. And when we compared that to KUB, their executives were making much smaller percentage of raises. I mean, it was a much smaller.
And I just tweeted out the link to the if you guys would like to check it, it's at the @6 News Twitter account.
You know, we've got so many documents on our website and in the story, and that was one thing that we really wanted to be able to give. You know, we got these documents. We've poured through them a ton. We wanted to make sure everyone else had the chance to kind of look at them and see for yourself and come up with your own thoughts on this spending. So we've got all those documents, from the receipts, the expense reports, the salaries, all that's on our website for you to take a look at. Actually, you can actually see the actual receipts. And by I mean Ryan, scanned all those in and spent a lot of time doing that just to give people the opportunity to kind of see what we did find.
One thing I found interesting is on the salary increases, the utility really is not backing down on that. They say they're justified, which with Jody Wigington, the CEO, and then Clark, the assistant general manager, we found roughly 30% increases between 2009 and 2013. They somewhat disagree with our calculations, which we've gone back and recalculated over and over.
There's only so many ways you can do a percentage.
Looks like they're right. But they say that they have to have those salary increases to keep their people around. But one thing I noticed is that most of those huge percentage increases are limited at the top. They're not with the. It doesn't appear that they're with the line workers and the people out in the field.
And one of the things that they did say in response to that is that there are those similar jobs are out there and they are paying higher pay, and so that they say for employee retention at the top, you've got to reward your employees, and that was their reaction to our questions about those increases.
And we just got a shout out from 10GA. And he says, we really appreciate you guys doing this. Hopefully MUS executives and board members will be held accountable for spending.
Well, we really appreciate that. Honestly, getting all the calls and emails about this story has been really, I guess it really validates all the work we put into it. You know, we're really glad that people have seen it and are asking questions, whether they don't agree with the story or they do agree with the story. It's really good to see that it's just, you know, our thoughts are that everyone should ask questions about their city government, their public utilities. You know, you should kind of always have an idea of what's going on in your community, and you know, because that's what keeps these people accountable, is by people asking questions. And in our opinion, you know, they should, any kind of public utility or city government or county government or state government, you know, they should be open to your questions, because you shouldn't have anything to hide.
And I know you've received a lot of comments from viewers about other utility companies and them wanting you to look into it.
It's true.
Have you looked into KUB? Kind of what can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, we kind of showed you for maybe those of you just joining in, this was what we got from KUB. So it was basically the same exact request. They were able to give it to us on disk, which was so much easier, and only charge us $2 versus around $900 from Morristown. So what we did find were we had requested the expenses of their executives, and so we looked at the travel expenses. And so remember, Morristown as a whole had spent about $91,000 on travel last year. So that's going to conferences, that includes hotels, the transportation, and the meals being eaten out there. And so then we broke that down to, well, let's look at what the executives have, and I wrote it down. So their executives came out to about $55,000 for travel. So compare that to KUB, which was around $9,000. And KUB's, and that was, again, those were their executives from both of those utilities compared. And what we found looking at KUB's travel expenses, they didn't go anywhere farther than Houston in the last year. They went on way less trips, and when they did, they had a per diem. They a lot of times didn't stay. They never stayed over. Let me say not never, because I'd have to go back and double, triple check, but they rarely stayed overnight in Nashville or other close cities. And what we found with Morristown is almost always they were staying overnight in Nashville, in Chattanooga, in Gatlinburg. Gatlinburg kind of made us raise our eyebrows because it's about an hour drive from Gatlinburg to Morristown. And again, a private company, that's maybe a little more acceptable, but again, this is ratepayer dollars, and they're charged with being good stewards of that money. So there are obviously extenuating circumstances sometimes, but this was, again, very frequent. This was a very regular thing to stay at these kinds of hotels in nearby cities.
So John Mays just tweeted 15 seconds ago, any more investigation before next month's board meeting?
We're working on it right now.
Yeah, we needed to take a little brain breather, I think, after our stories aired last week. But again, we were there today at the board meeting, got a lot of good information and interesting developments on the board itself, or management itself, wanting to take a review. So we do. We're always looking into stuff. I mean, we've got a long list of stuff we're investigating at. A lot of open record requests that we send those out and we wait for those to get back. You have 7 days to get a response back, so we've always got those requests out to various entities, and we're kind of looking into some other stuff as well. So
yeah, and something to watch for coming up. A board member is up for. I guess there's a board spot open, and that's going to come up in the next meeting.
Right, and a lot of people that so last week at City Council we covered this on Tuesday. The mayor had requested a review from the state to look into it, but the City Council didn't second that. And one of the city council members said that they thought it was premature and that it was up to the board of Morristown Utilities to be in charge of oversight, that they are the ones that are supposed to be keeping a lookout, that it's not the responsibility of the city council. Well, that's true, but if there is a history of these kinds of expenses, and if the board is not making note of that, today one of the board members told us she was actually pretty surprised. Lynn Elkins, she's a board member. She served several terms for Morristown Utility System Board. She said she was surprised by some of the charges. I think the one thing that really got her was that $19 movie charge and the several of those movie charges, and those were never reimbursed. And so that's kind of a concern for us. If they are the ones that are supposed to be in charge of oversight, but if they don't know these things are going on, how can they, be in charge of that? So a lot of people though said that, well, it's up to the board. So, and some of them said that there's nothing that's going to change until there's changes on the board. So that'll be kind of an interesting thing to see what happens next month as that spot opens up. And basically what happens is the mayor can submit nominations. They then the board submits their nominations, and the city council then votes on them. So that'll be an interesting thing to kind of see play out.
Well, then, sorry for doing that to you again. I keep on doing it. Another thing on the board is they're supposed to be the entity that's keeping the utility accountable. We're told that time and time again by city officials, and Yeah, by city officials. Sorry. And but they were going on these trips too. So the question became, they're supposed to be holding these people accountable, but they're enjoying the perks to some degree. I mean, some board members were out at that $500 dinner in Seattle.
Which was the one that I think really shocked us. It was $500 for, steak, shrimp and steak, ribeye. I mean, like a $50 ribeye. And, again, those are things that, as a private citizen, hey, you can enjoy, but it's the fact that it's being put on the company card, which again is being paid for with ratepayer dollars, is really, that's where the concern lies.
So that brings us to one of our last questions. Sherry Collins, she says she has high utility bills from Morristown Utility Systems, and we've gotten a lot of comments from that, and they think they're just a little bit unreasonably high. That's just the comments we've received. And she just wants to know, do these expenses translate to higher rates?
And that's a good question, and it's kind of hard to tell how they translated. I mean, a lot of what we did find were that rates, according to Morristown Utility System, are fairly low compared to the rest of the area. Today, the CEO, Jody Wigginton, said that they are the 10th lowest out of 87 regions in the state. And so, we received rate sheets, but we unfortunately could not get anyone to translate them. They basically said, no, we are just going to give you them. It's a bunch of numbers and decimal points, and definitely from talking to people, there was a concern about their rates, but that's kind of where the question is the response that they gave us was that a lot of these expenses were less than 1% of their total revenue. But and that very well could be the case. But what it translates to is this the best way to be spending that ratepayer money? I mean, could those rates be lowered if you have this kind of money to spend on travel and expenses? And that's still a question we're kind of waiting to hear if they could be lowered.
Yeah, and there's no question you're paying for it. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, it is your ratepayer money funds the utility, and yes, you're paying for it.
Like, for instance, the travel we broke down, $6 per customer. Some of the parties, $1 per customer. A breakfast, another $1 per customer. So those might seem like small amounts, but when you're trying to pay bills and trying to stretch it, everything's stretched thin. I mean, that can be tough to pay for, and it adds up. And I mean, that's just what we found. We were, we only looked at travel and eating out.
We've got a question saying, what is your response to Commission Chair Board Member statement saying that allegations which arose in a Knoxville television station are unfair and in some cases not objectively reported? Well, that's a good question. We kind of addressed that today in our story because he did say that at the meeting this morning. And we can tell you, as we showed you, our information came from the documents that they provided us. So they gave us, I mean, I can open this up and kind of show you guys what's in here. This is basically, I mean, hundreds of pages of expense receipts. So we added them up, and pretty sure our math is good, and we took all our information from the documents that were given to us from Morristown Utility System. We spoke with city representatives, we spoke with the mayor, we spoke with a city council member, and they used the words lavish. And we raised the question, are these, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to say, here's what we found, what do you think? We showed them to customers, we showed them to ratepayers, we showed them to city officials, and got their reaction. So we tried to be, and I think we were very objective, and we gave them, again, opportunity after opportunity to incorporate their information in the story as well, and kind of explain these. So
yeah, I mean,
I disagree that our report wasn't fair.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at our stories, we're giving you straight facts. The numbers are there for you to judge yourself. Now, we have opinions from city officials who say, yeah, I think it's lavish. And it's easy to dismiss our reporting as not objective when you refuse to talk on camera, which
it is.
It's important to point out we included full statements from everything they gave to us posted online, and we include some of them in the on-air report too.
Exactly, because again, we wanted to give that. We wanted to know. I mean, that's why we're doing the report, is we want to know. Okay, this is where you're spending your money. Why? Can you tell ratepayers why you need a banquet that costs? The end of the year banquet this year was upwards of 15,000. This was the breakdown of this year. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know. And never mind. You're gonna have to look at. You can look at it online. But you know, we asked when we went to that employee banquet. You know, can you explain to ratepayers why do you need a $15,000 banquet? Why do you need a lunch and a boat ride? Why do you also need prizes? I mean, what we wanted to know was why, so that we could give those answers to the ratepayers, and they wouldn't answer. They wouldn't talk to us on camera, and so it makes it very difficult to show their side if they don't want to give it. Is essentially it. And Mr. McGuffin did not return. I mean, he's the board chairman, and you know, we reached out to the CEO, Jody Wigington. We reached out to the CFO, Assistant General Manager Clark Rucker. I called all the board members multiple times. Mr. McGuffin, again, he's the board chairman, and you know, I left him dozens of messages, not dozens, but 10 to a dozen. Called him every day during our story, just trying to give them an opportunity to discuss this.
Is there any kind of last things that you'd like to talk about your investigation?
I mean, I think kind of going back to that question of, because I've had people ask, you know, like, well, what if I want to know what my utility company is doing? And again, because this isn't just Morristown. I mean, utilities spend ratepayer dollars on things all the time, and it's a question of, well, what are they spending it on? And anyone has the right to request those documents from your utility. I mean, everyone has a right to know where their dollars are going, and sometimes you're going to hit a roadblock, you know, which is sort of what we hit, and that's unfortunate. And you know, I hope if you have questions for utilities, you know, you'll try to ask them, or if you've got more questions for utility, for Morristown Utility, give the board members a call, give management a call, and see, you know, and just ask. You know, we'll be interested to see how the review goes of their policies and see if any changes come about, because I think that's from what we've heard from a lot of people that they want to see some changes.
I think one thing I took away from this is, if you look town to town, none of these utilities are competing.
Mm-hmm.
And so should there be a greater oversight over these utilities? Because right now it appears there really isn't much of an oversight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some have more oversight than others. But for instance, with the Morristown utility, according to the mayor, it's a self-appointing board basically,
mm-hmm.
and they're monitoring the utility. So I mean, it all comes down back to accountability.
Right. So do we need to look at, you know, is there someone above those, you know, those utilities? Is there someone from the state, you know, that should take a, you know, that there maybe should be more oversight into looking at that? So those are more questions that we have and we're looking for answers on. So any other questions?
I think that's it.
Well, we really appreciate you guys joining us, and we appreciate you watching and reading our stories, and we hope you'll stay tuned as we continue taking a look at this and plenty of other things.
And if someone would like to get in contact with you, Alexis.
Sure. You can contact me. My email is azotos@wate.com. You can give the newsroom a call. I've been taking calls all week, just kind of hearing people's stories about this. You know, even just people that want to talk about their utility bills and are curious as to how those compare to other people's utility bills. So feel free to give me a call, you know, in the newsroom. Shoot me an email. I'm on Twitter all the time. You can, you know, send me a tweet, and you know, we'd be happy to take a look at things that you want us to take a look at. So we appreciate it. Thanks, guys.